All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started for today. Welcome back, everybody. If you were not here last time, welcome to our session. Again, my name is Soha Mahmoud-Tabana, and we have Leslie Baines with us and Suzanne Abdelrahim. And today we are going to go ahead and build on what we talked about last time. We talked about building communication. What were the best practices that you've used? We shared some of those ideas together. And this week, we really want to build those bridges and talk about how to take those skills to the next level by building strong relationships with our bilingual families. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on for today's session. And Leslie, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I think you have to unshare yours so I can get in there. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get on in here to our presentation. And so when we're looking at our agenda, it looks very similar to what it did last time. We're going to start with some introductions, talk about what we're going to be talking about, review some things from last time and build upon that knowledge. And then we're going to talk about some current practice. What do you do with your relationship building? What are some strengths that you have that you can share out? We're going to go into the research, what we found the research says in terms of relationship building. We are going to share out some tools and again, really focusing on bilingual families and getting them more involved in building stronger relationships. And then finally, we'll end with some reflection. And you'll see on our screen, there's a QR code there for the Padlet. So if you need to get into the Padlet again, it's a great resource for you. And we're going to be referring back to that quite a bit during our session. So this is going to be good for you to have. One of the things we also wanted to take a moment is to acknowledge Dr. Julie Webb, who's an integral part of this project. She has shared in a lot of idea building and creating of the resources as well. And Suzanne had briefly mentioned that she was waiting for a baby to come, and baby is now here. So she is getting herself acclimated with the new baby, but I just wanted to let you know that she is a very integral part of our work that we're sharing with you today. And so just reviewing some information from webinar one, we have that Padlet link, and we also have the Flipgrid for reflections. And Suzanne shared out a link and she opened that up for everyone so that you can get in there and access information to Flipgrid. Leslie is going to be delving in deeper to it today to show you how you can really go in there and make those connections a bit stronger beyond just basic translation. So before we do that, I'm going to hop on over to our Padlet because I wanted to show you two additional resources that are on there from the communication section. So just backtracking to our communication, we have added one other thing in here, and that is the survey for communication. And we have it in English and we have it in Spanish as well, the parent communication survey. So here is the English and here is the Spanish translation. And we developed this after our last webinar because one of the things that we noticed in our conversations was that a lot of people felt like parents really wanted that face-to-face communication, and that was really important. And so one of the things we really thought about was taking this survey and really finding out what are your parents' preferences so that we can figure this out from the get-go at the beginning of the year. So asking them basic questions. Do they have internet at home? Is it reliable internet? Do they have internet access from their smartphone where they're going to be able to respond to you if you send out a message? Or is it something where they have to go to a library in order to have access to the message? their preferred language for communication. So again, if we are translating documentation, we know what language is their preference, the best hours to contact them. And then again, it goes into the best ways to contact for different things, whether it's a flyer or a school event or a newsletter. And then we delve in a little bit deeper and just ask some follow-up questions to what adult in your family communicates with the school, so that we know, are we talking to mom? Are we talking to dad? Is it big sister or big brother that's going to be our main line of communication when we're speaking to the family? And what to do if you need to contact them right away in case of an emergency. So if English is not their main language, who should you contact, or is it still them as that resource? So again, we added this parent communication survey for you. Another thing we added in as a resource is from the New York City Department of Education. One of the things that they have created in here, if you are a district that uses Google Classroom, they have instructions on how to use Google Classroom in all these different languages. And so I actually went in here and took a look at the Arabic one to see how good is it? And it's a native Arabic speaker clearly translating this. So anybody with those Arabic skills could go in there and easily follow those instructions on how to set up Google Classroom. So just another resource. Again, the more that we can enable and encourage people to learn these resources and offer it in their native languages, we know the better that that's going to be. So we are going to be referring again back to this Padlet more often with other resources that we have available. But for now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue on. And I wanted to take a moment to hear from you and talk about if there was a new idea or strategy or tool that you either tried out, and if you tried it out, how did it go? What worked, what maybe needed to be changed. And we know it's a very, very busy time of year. We know that some of you haven't had students and they're finally starting to come into schools. So if you haven't used anything, that's fine as well. But we're curious to hear your thoughts on maybe what you're planning on trying out or what you feel like you might do differently as far as communication building based on what we've talked about. Is there anybody that wants to share with us?
If I could just interject for just a second. If you try to access the Flipgrid and the link didn't work or you couldn't get in there, I want you to go ahead and try it again because there was something with the permissions. I needed to make sure that all your emails were in there. So hopefully it works for you. I don't know if any of you tried to do it. If you want to use Flipgrid to do the reflection, that's great. You could take a quick video of yourself and just kind of talk about what you tried or what you're planning on trying. There's a sample in there for you already. You don't have to use Flipgrid, but if you want, you can do that. And if you prefer to go the Padlet route, then you can put your reflections on the Padlet. But I know that Soha's giving us an opportunity right now to do that, but I wanted to let you know you have those options. And the Flipgrid link is in the chat. Hopefully you have access now. My apologies if you tried to access it earlier and it didn't work for you. Sorry, Soha. Thank you.
That's okay. Any reflections, things that you're thinking about doing differently in the future, maybe starting off your school year a certain way, thinking about these communication standards?
It looks like Laura and Teresa have some reflections on there. So thank you to both of you.
Okay, are you unable to, you can unmute yourself?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Teresa.
I personally am just so amazed and overwhelmed at the amount of resources. I just feel that there's so much here that I'm definitely going to need to just even keep reading everything and reviewing even through the summer and try to figure out what my plan is. A lot of us in school are trying to wrap our heads around next year and what that's going to look like academically, social, emotional issues and enrollment issues. And it's kind of an overwhelming time of year right now. The the excitement that all these resources, I know that they give me for things that I wouldn't have been able to do before. And again, I'm in a one-on-one face-to-face situation with a lot of my families, so I'm lucky. But I was able to share some of the resources with my daughter-in-law, who is a DHH teacher in LA Unified, and she is itinerant, and she goes around and she used to deal with many a diverse community. And so I was able to share some of the things that we talked about with her, and so she was so excited. And I was showing her the dojo and the Skype and a couple of the resources. I was sharing the articles with her. So I felt like, well, if I didn't really get to implement something brand new, she was really excited, because they just went back a week ago or something, and she's always looking for resources to communicate better. For myself, I will definitely be using the translator on Class Dojo, because that is my main source of communication. Also was just looking at some of the resources that I think we're going over today. The surveys look invaluable. So I think I might be speaking for a lot of the teachers here that we're winding down, and it's almost as overwhelming as starting right now, because we're trying to develop plans for the next year, and just kind of in a mess, because kids have really lost a lot this year. So it's perfect timing, because now we have all these resources with communication and everything we're talking about. So it's going to be very helpful.
Well, Teresa, I really appreciate you saying that. I think you're reiterating what a lot of people think, as far as also just really being overwhelmed. And we were really trying to be sensitive to that, because one of the things we talked about as a team is we know that everybody's under an enormous amount of stress. We know teaching is already stressful enough how it is. You know, a lot of extra time is devoted, but now we have this extra barrier of online schooling and hybrid and going back and forth between the two as we're trying to navigate and figure out those ropes. So a lot of these things we were really thinking, hopefully you could start to incorporate and think about exactly what you said in the summer as you're leading into a fresh new year. And so this is actually the ideal time to just start taking in these resources and have them in your back pocket for when you're ready to use them. So I'm glad.
And there's also the issue of starting new things right now. I think it would just push families unless obviously it's just a resource you can use immediately to communicate, and that's always helpful. But I'm always a little bit nervous about changing anything at this point. They've already been such troopers, all the families, about getting used to everything.
Absolutely. You are correct. Thank you for sharing. Was there someone else that was going to share out as well? Okay, well then we are going to go ahead and we are going to continue on. So one of the things that we thought about as we ended our last session is we wanted to delve in a little bit deeper beyond just communicating in a family's home language by translation tools. So what Leslie's going to do is she's going to show you different ways to kind of think outside of the box when we're thinking about translanguaging and taking things into the home language, and how we can use resources such as Flipgrid or Google Translate to really take it a step further in relationship building and beyond simply communicating for the purpose of translation. So I am going to go ahead and hand this over to Leslie, and I'm going to stop sharing so you can share your screen.
Thanks, Soha.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so I want to show you some different ways that you might want to use Flipgrid. And so the first thing, Flipgrid has so many different uses for communicating and building relationships with families. One thing I might recommend, though, is if you're using Flipgrid with families, and you go to share it with them, you can go to who has access to this topic, edit the permissions, and then I like to do it as a guest password. And then that way, if your families don't have email addresses or you can't get in, like how, we couldn't get in today, this just makes it really easy for families. So you can make up a really easy password, like the teacher's last name or something like that. And then they don't have to have access to get in through email. Just makes it a little simpler that way. For families. So we just wanted to show you one way that you could use it to start to build community and build the relationships with families and get to know them better. This is a book called Family Pictures or Cuadros de Familia. It's a bilingual book it has the side-by-side text in both languages. And it's by a Mexican-American artist, Carmen Lomas Garza. And she paints these beautiful pictures. Each page is a different family memory. And then she's describing the memory and what's going on in the picture. And so we read this with students, and then we invite them to share their own family memories, using all of their languages to do that. And then we can also extend that invitation to families as well. So we ask families to share a memory from their childhood, from a holiday, really anything that they want to share, any memory that's special to them. And they can draw a picture, they can share a photograph, and then talk about it on Flipgrid. They can do it with the children and use all of their languages to explain the memory. What you can show your families how to do is if you click on this immersive reader that shows the little book with the speaker here, and then go over to this book again, it says reading preferences. So it's kind of sneaky. You wouldn't know that this is all of the translation resources inside here, but you can choose all these different languages to choose from. So say I have Russian students in my class, and you can either translate just a word or two or the whole document. So now the whole explanation of how to do this task is now in Russian. And a lot of the languages, but not all of them, also have audio support, so we can hear it read out loud.
В классе мы читаем книгу под названием «Cuadros de Familia».
Okay, and that's really important for our families that haven't had opportunities to develop strong literacy in their home languages. So they can see it, they can hear it, they can go back and forth between the English and the home language and really understand, what it is that we're asking them to do. So now say we have families that are sharing their stories. Well, how do we know what they're saying? We want to know, we want to understand, we want to develop those relationships. So how you can do that is with Google Translate. So I'm going to now switch my sharing really quick so that I'm sharing two things. Will it let me? It's not going to let me. Okay, but I'm going to share this one then. Okay, so now I have a parent's response open in Flipgrid that you can't see because you're looking at Google Translate, and it's in Arabic. And then I have Google Translate open, and I like to open the full page of Google Translate, not just that little preview, because the little preview, when you're playing the audio text, it like stops it every sentence and interrupts your translation. And I don't like that. I want it to play the whole thing and get the whole translation for me. So I'm going to click the microphone here and play the video, and then we'll see what we get. So I've selected Arabic as the language of input. Oops, and then English as the language of output. There we go.
أهلا وسهلا، أنا اسمي سوزان وأنا أم رمزي. حبيت أقول لك إحنا في رمضان وبنصوم كل يوم. كنت عايزة أسألك ممكن أجي على الفصل أتعلم الأولاد على رمضان وأجيب معايا بلح عشان يجرب.
Okay, so it's not going to be perfect, but it's good enough to get an idea of what the mother is saying. And it's funny, I swear every time I play this, it translates it a little bit different. So if I do it a few times, I actually get an even better idea of what she's communicating, because it'll have like a few different translations. But anyway, we can see that she's introducing herself. I'm Ramsey's mother. I would like to tell you that we're in Ramadan. Something about every day. And is it possible for the children to learn about Ramadan? It's changing as we go. I think I need to stop this. Okay. And, you know, children to learn about Ramadan, and I answer. And so if we keep playing it, we'll see she's volunteering to help the class learn about Ramadan. And so, you know, it's not a perfect translation. It actually does a lot better with written text than audio text. And we probably have some dialect variations going on here too. But it's enough for me to know what she's offering. And so now, you know, I can respond back, and I can invite her in, and we can translate across languages, and we can share her information and her stories and her culture with the other students in the class. Okay, so let's see. Soha, do you want to go back to the PowerPoint?
Leslie, real quick, there's a question that came into the chat and said, how did you input the audio text?
Oh, I just played the video in Flipgrid. I was trying to show you side by side, but it wasn't letting me. So I just clicked play in Flipgrid. And so it was like playing the video that the parent had sent in. And then I clicked the microphone in Google Translate. So it just did the rest automatically. It's listening to Flipgrid and translating automatically in Google Translate.
And if you notice, as it heard the video from the parent, it transcribed it in Arabic. And then underneath it was the transliteration. So it was what the Arabic speaker said using the English letters. And then on the right-hand side was the actual translation. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it
Thanks,
works pretty
Leslie.
well.
Sorry.
All right. So Leslie, you want me to share the PowerPoint back up?
Yeah. I think I just have one more slide left.
Sure.
It's the one with all of the, yep, that one. Okay, so we just wanted to show you this as well, because this is a teacher who used Google Translate with families and with the children to create a retelling of The Little Red Hen, and it's in 4 different languages. So up on the wall of the classroom. And we can do this in math with math explanations, or really across the content areas. And you can do it obviously just with the students and the teacher helping using Google Translate, or we really like to bring the families in and get them to help with this too. So the languages really are up on the walls. You can see them when you walk in, you can feel them, and then think about the comprehension of that story, right? As kids are looking across languages, they're drawing connections between the structure of how the language works in their home language versus in English, and really getting stronger at both languages while they're doing that. All right.
Thanks. And so you can, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So if you remember, the slide should look familiar. If you were in session 1 with us, this is our READ framework for bilingual family school partnerships. And we just wanted to pull this up and remind you of the different components. And if you were at our session, our first session, you remember there's a video that goes along with this. The video is also posted in the Padlet if you want to refresh your memory and view that a little bit later. But just wanted to remind us all that we are focusing on relationships today. And of course, you know, how that connects to student learning. And so remember, our framework really conveys that dynamic approach to family engagement. And we're really promoting that reciprocal communication, really empowering families and focusing on those trusting relationships, again, also in service of student learning. And so if we can go to the next slide, I want us to start thinking about relationships and our current practice in relationships. So thank you. We have some questions on the slide that we want you to think about. And the first one how much do you know about students' languages, backgrounds, cultures, and family literacy practices? I know some of you shared already some of this information on the Padlet, and even in our first session. I know that for some of you, there's been some new students this year in your school with maybe some backgrounds that you're not as familiar with. So thinking about that, and where do you go and what do you do to learn more about your students' backgrounds? How do you build on that? How well do we understand the needs of our bilingual families? How well do we understand the expectations and motivations of our bilingual families? And then also about the strategies that we use. What are some of the things that you do to build trust with your bilingual families? And what language practices do we use to accommodate our bilingual families? So I want you just to take a moment to think about all these questions, and you don't have to respond to all of them right now, but if there's one that's speaking to you more than another, we'd love to hear back from you. You know, what are some of your reflections on these questions? What are you finding that you're doing well? Maybe some areas that you really want some support in, again, with keeping relationships kind of at the forefront. So I'm going to give you just about a minute to kind of think about that. And then I would love if any of you would like to share. Please feel free to take yourself off mute and share aloud with us. Anybody want to share? Do you feel that you kind of have a good sense of your students' languages and backgrounds, or is that really an area that you need to do more with and kind of dig a little deeper? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like that's an area that I always want to do better at, just because I feel like sometimes you don't want to come across too inquisitive and trying to get too much information out of them, make them feel uncomfortable. But I would like to figure out ways that I can actively learn more about their families, especially the literacy practices, just so I can know more about how to support them at home in a successful way.
I'm so glad you said that, because actually that's something that we talked about as a team as we were developing survey questions and tools. We were thinking, okay, well, how much do we ask? Are we asking too much? Does it become then intrusive? And then how do we learn about, this is actually the topic of our last internal meeting, really was, how do we learn more about family practices, literacy practices at home, without necessarily coming out and asking those specific questions? Maybe things that you can engage students in and families in, activities or different ideas that would kind of tell you that without necessarily asking those direct questions. So we're going to talk more about that, and we're going to be developing more tools around that, you know, some activities that we can do with our students and with our families that will help shed light on that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Hi, Leah. I've noticed I have the privilege of being completely bilingual in Spanish, and that's the only other language population that I have at our school. So I feel like I'm at advantage in that particular setting. One thing that I've noticed specifically this year as having the advantage of Zoom, where I can get on with just that one family, and being able to screen share and highlight things and point things out. It's just been such a blessing in disguise, just to be able to get on Zoom, and I can tell them, what time do you want to meet? And I could be at home doing it. And it's just been so lovely to have that in kind of my wheelhouse this year. Whereas before, trying to get a meeting with families, you know, when it would work for them, and I don't live where I work, so I'm about a 40-minute commute, so that was always a challenge. But now having Zoom, it's like, oh, you want to get on at 8 o'clock? That's fine, I'll get on with you at 8 o'clock. So, or 1:30 right after the kids get out, that works for me too. So there's been a lot of flexibility with Zoom.
That's exciting. We hear a lot about, you know, the negative aspects, how, oh, I don't get to see them, but, you know, like you said, this is an amazing opportunity for you to be able to connect whenever. So that's great, Leah. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, I do feel that doing things through Zoom or Google Meet, as we do in our district, as far as like conferences and even like school events where, informational nights or family fun nights, a lot of those families that maybe didn't attend before, possibly due to childcare or schedules, like feel like the involvement or at least the attendance is higher. And they're getting more information than they would otherwise. So it definitely makes me think, moving forward, offering things that are virtual just so that those families have that opportunity to like jump on a meeting link while their kids are eating dinner or whatnot. So, and even with conferences too, I mean, obviously conferences have always been face-to-face and I would prefer that, but giving parents that option where I can share my screen and show their work over as opposed to like a phone, conference. So that has been a plus, I think, as far as like communication with families go and a little bit higher communication in some ways.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Anybody else?
So in reflecting on the first question, I always have to remind myself that just because someone is a Spanish speaker doesn't mean they're from Mexico, which is our typical, most of our families are, but not all of them are. And so recognizing that difference and appreciating that and making sure that, I keep that in the back of my mind as we go throughout the year. It's not all about like certain things.
Great points. Thank you for sharing. So true, so important. Erica?
Yes, the mailman came, so my dog is barking. No, I'm just keep looking to that first question with how much do I know about students' language backgrounds, cultures, and family literacy practice. And I touched on it last week, how we have an influx of people that just came to the country here, and our demographics of our school is slightly changing. And something that came up, something that came up recently was that some of the students wanted to pray midday. And we had never had that before. And so it was kind of like this, okay, well, who's going to watch them? Where will they go? Like, what were the other kids say? Like, we wanted to make it comfortable for them. Like, how do we address this and all of that? So that's something that we as a staff need to start discussing and look at, and also start integrating into our school so that it is common practice and it is okay. They're not being teased or anything like that, because it's, we haven't had it at our school before. So I just want to see how we can bridge with those families and that are coming in, like, what do they need from the school? How can we make it comfortable for them? All of that stuff. So yeah.
Erica, you were the one who had shared that you had a lot of families that spoke Pashto, right? And Urdu. So you probably have a large population from Afghanistan or Pakistan. Okay.
Yes, both.
And so I'm going to assume that they're probably celebrating Ramadan this month. And so probably many of them are fasting. And so making those accommodations too, right? At lunchtime, can they go to the library or somewhere else where they can read, or like you said, engage in prayer time. So making those accommodations and really understanding what that is. During Ramadan, they don't even have water. We don't drink water during Ramadan. A lot of people don't even know that, not even water. So, really kind of understanding and learning about what's involved.
Exactly, because we had several just not show up, and we were like, why aren't you coming to school? And it's because they didn't want to send their kids to school while they were fasting. And so just learning that, in of itself, and how can we support you're fasting, but also get them to school. So it's like, it's just been this interesting walk this year. And it's like, okay, moving forward, how are we going to work together?
Yes. Well, I really enjoyed reading all your questions too that you had on the Padlet, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. I actually did some work with teachers in Pakistan and had the opportunity to visit classrooms in Pakistan and know a lot about the Muslim faith. So I would love to talk with you more if you have specific questions about, education in Pakistan and some of these other areas. But it's interesting, you also mentioned a lot of the kids maybe missing school. And it could also be because during Ramadan, students are, they're waking up very early before sunrise to have their breakfast, and then they might be sleeping, and then they might miss, their alarm in the morning. So they're just kind of like sleeping in. So it's understanding, there might be an increase in attendance, or decrease, I should say, in attendance during that time. So again, really just understanding, what are our families experiencing? What are the reasons for this? And talking with families, letting them know that you understand and this is what you're hoping and what can we do to kind of make sure that the kids are getting what they need and what they're missing, but that their backgrounds are also, their culture and their background are being respected and understood. So I appreciate your comments, Erica. Thank you. Anybody else? So a little bit later, Soha is actually going to share with you a tool that I think really gets at all these questions. Really learning and understanding what are the cultural backgrounds of our families. Not only that, but what are the expectations and motivation of our bilingual families? What do our bilingual families expect from our students? What are their expectations around schooling? What they think their role is, because we may have a definition of what the family role should be, right, in their child's education, but they may have a different view. They may feel that it may be disrespectful to interfere too much or to ask too many questions, or, or they may feel that in their, in their home country, it may be education is more the school's responsibility, that the family really has to kind of be more hands off. So it's really just kind of communicating what are the expectations from the school, and knowing what are the expectations from the family, and how can we bridge the two. So one of the really important tools that we're going to share a little bit later today is a survey around family culture and values. And I think that you'll find it really exciting, and we would love any feedback that you have around it as well. If you see that there's some important things that need to be on there, or something even created as an extension, we would love that feedback from you all. So hopefully some of the tools that we're going to be sharing with you in a little bit really address these questions for you. Okay, so I want to engage you guys in a little activity here. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. We have a letter to the principal. And this is a letter from a bilingual parent. And I want you to, we're going to have somebody read aloud this letter to the whole group. So if you are brave and want to share and want to read for us, I'd love some volunteers. As we read through the letter from to the principal from this family member, I want you to think about, what is the parent saying? And then what do you notice about the relationship between school and family? And if you were the principal, what would you do? So it's a very brief letter from a Vietnamese parent writing to the principal. So do I have a volunteer who would like to read this? Someone want to read this out loud for us?
I can if nobody else will, I guess.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Dear Principal Scott. Okay, ignore me butchering anybody's names here. Dear Principal Scott, my son, Bin, started at your school in December, and I wanted to write you. We have been very nervous about reaching out. We aren't really sure what is the norm here in the US. We always feel unsure about attending school events because we don't always understand everything, and we never know if we are to shake hands, smile, clap, sit down, or stand up. We have a big Vietnamese community here, and we try to help each other out. When we first visited Bin's classroom, I wished there was someone who spoke Vietnamese because I had so many questions. I don't get to talk to the teacher alone. I have lots to tell her, but my English is not good. Her name is Mrs. Meyer, and Ben says she is very nice. I wanted to let Mrs. Meyer know that we have help with English. Our neighbor's daughter is very good in English, and she will help Ben with his homework. We do not have a lot of books in English. We have some books in Vietnamese. Is it okay to borrow some books from the school? It is very important for us to know how to best help Ben. We want him to do well in school. Let us know any more information about what we can do. Thank you for all you do. Sincerely, Min Nguyen?
Nguyen, yes.
Nguyen.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. All right. So going back to our questions here, what do you notice about the relationship here between this parent and the school? What are you noticing?
There's a disconnect.
Okay.
Big
Tell me more.
There's a disconnect in the communication. There's a language barrier, and the parent wants to get to know them, to know who they are, who their family is, who her child is.
Mm-hmm.
With these people that spend more time with their child than probably she does.
Mm-hmm. Good. What else are you noticing?
It seems like there's not been a lot of communication between the teacher and the family. There's a lack of, the books and, what the teacher's expecting the parents to do as like a link towards school and home, what each person's job is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really impressed with this parents, like, I don't just being so open with like expressing all of these concerns and the willingness to help. Like, I don't know, I wish all parents would speak up and be so vocal and advocate for their children. Obviously the teacher should be doing, something a little bit more on their end if they're feeling this much of a disconnect, but it's pretty, impressive that this parent is reaching out and offering to do things on their end and explaining their situation, so detailed, and a lot of things that some parents might be afraid to say, like, we're not coming to an event because we don't know if we should, shake hands or smile or clap. Like, some parents might just not even want to talk about that, or so to just even write this letter to begin with, I think is pretty cool.
I noticed in the letter too that she did say that there's a big Vietnamese community there and they try to help each other. And so I'm just wondering why there hasn't been a bridge already between the school and this Vietnamese community. Seems like there would already be maybe a liaison that can communicate, or that there should be a tie of the culture within the school already. So curious why that maybe hasn't happened yet.
Great point. Yeah, maybe there is that connection and she somehow doesn't know who that liaison is. Or we don't know. Great point though, great point. So if you were Principal Scott, what would you do? What would be your first steps?
I guess if I was Principal Scott, I would check in with the teacher to see, how the teacher, what accommodations or how the teacher has already reached out to the family, what she's already done, and what other resources the teacher thinks she's going to provide for the family.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So starting with the teacher, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And then, maybe the teacher isn't aware of someone that can translate, or some other services at the school might be able to help the family gain more information about the district in general and about routines in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Great. I find it really interesting that the point of being unsure of how to kind of behave at some of these meetings, do we stand, do we shake hands, do we smile? That to me is really interesting because I think it brings up a really important issue where teachers and schools really need to look at school systems of the home countries that are represented in our classrooms. What does the school system look like in home countries? And then just because we may learn that from one family, And we may kind of have a general idea, but we also have to be cognizant not to generalize that to everybody who is part of that culture, because there could be differences in, you know, different towns, different regions. Are they from a small village where schools might be very different from a child who comes from the same country, but a more urban area that has, you know, a whole different type of school. So thinking about the nuances within that as well, and school systems, but not only that, but a lot of the cultural rules and traditions that are sometimes hard to learn. And I'll give you an example. Actually, I just thought of an example. At one of the schools that I was working at, actually in the Los Angeles area, I remember some young students, and I think they were from Korea. A couple of the kids had like a scarf wrapped around their neck. And I thought it was really cute. Like, is that a tie? What are they wearing? Not all of the Korean kids had them on, but just a few. And then I noticed a couple of weeks later, and this was like in December, a couple of weeks later, I noticed what that was. And I actually asked a Korean colleague of mine, and she said that some of the Korean families, if their child is getting sick or they want to keep them from getting sick, there's usually like a little scarf wrapped around their neck. And I didn't know that. I honestly thought it was part of their outfit, or just, you know, something that they wore, but it was a cultural, something that was really embedded in their culture to help protect them from getting a cold or from getting sicker. They would tie this scarf around their neck. So the point of me telling you that really is just to kind of understand some of these small little cultural nuances or traditions, or things that families do that we may not know, or we may assume they're for something completely different. But again, it just goes back to really knowing your students. If a parent doesn't shake your hand, it's not because they're being rude, or it may not be appropriate or polite in their culture. And so understanding and kind of learning, being flexible, understanding those cultural norms. Another example would be, I had a teacher who told me, well, I have a parent whose child is from Saudi Arabia, and the mom won't shake hands with me, and does she not like me? And I said, no, it's because you're a male, and that's part of the culture. You know, she's not shaking hands with anyone who is a male who's outside of her family. And so please don't consider it as rude. She's actually trying to be respectful. And that's, you know, part of the culture. So understanding those little nuances again, and that goes back to this letter here. Do we shake hands? Do we smile? Do we clap? Do we sit down? She just kind of wants to know, what am I supposed to do here? What's appropriate? What's rude? What's not rude? So a lot of things going on here with this family. And I like this example. And actually, I'll tell you, this example comes from, it's actually modified. We actually wrote it, but it comes from this text that I love. It's called A Guide for Administrators, English Language Learners at School. And if you're an administrator, even if you're not an administrator, I think this book is really helpful because it offers a lot of surveys and reflection for action too, within each of these kind of little examples and vignettes. And so, you know, they really emphasize knowing and understanding about policies, programs, practices, communicating that with families. Do they really understand the school's policies and the school's practices? And does our school, or as a school, do we see linguistic and cultural diversity as resources to be developed, or are they just kind of off to the side? How are we using our families' backgrounds and cultures and really develop on that and build on that to create more effective relationships? So again, so this example, there's a lot of similar things like that in this text, and I can send that out to you if you're interested. I'll send you out the title and the author. All right. Soha, do you want to go to the next slide here. I think we're going to move on to some of the research now and talk a little bit about the research around relationships.
Thanks, Suzanne. So we are going to continue on, and we've talked a bit about family engagement, and we just wanted to reiterate again, when we're talking about building positive goal-oriented relationships with families, we want to make it mutually respectful. We want to sustain families, cultures, and languages, and we want to include genuine efforts to understand each family's beliefs, values, and priorities. And one of the things I was thinking about while Suzanne was talking is I live in an area that has a very high Korean population. And every time I would go to school and meet a new family there, they would introduce themselves and they would introduce their children and they would say, our Korean name is, and then they would say, our English name or American name is. And I don't know. And I wish I would ask. And it's one of those things that someone had brought up earlier. Is it offensive to ask why you're doing that? Is it just because you want to make it easier for us? I would really like to call you by your Korean name because that is your given name. And I had a neighbor who said her daughter was really distraught and upset when she became school age and had to change her name to a different name when she went to school. She said, but that's not my name. Why are people going to call me that? And so really taking that next step and saying, why are they doing that? And can they maybe embrace their culture? And it's okay. You know, someone might pronounce it a little bit wrong, but you correct them and go through that whole idea about that. I read a book with my son today called Chrysanthemum, and it's a little girl who gets teased about her name. And I think that's a beautiful beginning of the year book to read with your students so they can really value and appreciate their name and speak up and say, this is my name and I'm proud of it, even though it might be different than what you're used to. And Suzanne and I can attest when we're naming our children in Arab families, we always say, well, how are they going to pronounce that? Are they going to make fun of our child? What's the best way to spell it to make sure that it's easier? So, you know, really keeping those things in mind and the acceptance and teaching children that as well as we're going through. So continuing on though with our definitions, again, we think about families, we're thinking about parents, extended family members, and additional or alternative caregivers. So thinking about everybody who could possibly be in this child's life, supporting them throughout their educational experience. And then we have engagement, which is the active involvement that balances out power and opportunity between educators and caregivers. So we really want to engage those families. And so let's delve in a little bit deeper about what the research says. So teachers and administrators should have knowledge of the families they serve, including an understanding of value of their language, backgrounds, and cultural traditions. And translanguaging, tying that back in, can be a useful practice for accommodating the needs of those diverse populations. So if you're giving them a survey, maybe they could do a video representation. Instead of answering it using pencil and paper, they can do a video answer. Maybe you could do it as a conference with them so that you're hearing more of their vocal expressions. Is it something that's concerning to them? Is it something that they find an interesting topic? So something that you don't always get if it's just a paper going home to a parent, you take it to that next level. Maybe they record it on Flipgrid and you do the translation so you can hear them as you're listening to that translation. So again, putting in that translanguaging component to try to accommodate and go a little bit deeper. And when building relationships with families, it's important to be familiar with their cultural traditions. We've talked quite a bit about that today. And then finally, school relationships require establishing connections to build mutual trust and support between bilingual students, educators, and families. And really, that's our ultimate goal, is building up that trust, letting our families know that we truly care about what their backgrounds and traditions are, because that's going to help build those bridges and make us better teachers in understanding what those children's needs are. And so let's delve in a little bit and talk about some of the tools that we have created when we're talking about relationship building. So here you'll see that there is a family culture and values survey. I'm going to show that to you in just a minute. Again, it's just delving a little bit deeper. So it's not just how can I reach out to you and communicate with you? It's tell me a little bit about your background and how I can help incorporate that information into my classroom. We have a relationship survey for teachers' self-reflection. So thinking about yourself and maybe biases that you might have towards certain cultures. What do you think about when you think about different cultures and traditions, and just taking an honest look about that when you're looking at your own self-reflection. We have reading together and magnets. So these are translated items that we're going to use to help guide our parents in helping their children at home. And again, these are translated and they're going to be translated into different languages, and we'll be sharing the different languages. Some of them are already translated actually into multiple different languages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the Padlet so I can show you all of these as we talk about them. So let me go back to our Padlet. And you'll see here that we have our tools for building relationships. And the very first one is that family cultural survey, and it's in English and in Spanish. And you'll see here that we talk about how it can be sent home, or you can try to use Google Translate to do an interview format for it. But these questions are a bit different because it talks about what goals they have for their child, what are hopes and dreams that they have for their child's future, what motivates their child to do well in school. So tell us what you know so that we don't have to figure it out. It's one step closer and one less thing we have to do to build that bridge. How does your child feel about school? How does your child learn best? What helps your child feel better when they're frustrated or upset? And then even just talking about if they have school supplies that they need, what can we do to help them if they need supplies, and not assuming that everybody has the access to all of those. And hopefully, if you do this in a written situation, they'll be more comfortable and more apt to share that information. What activities do you like to do as a family on weekends and during free time? So again, is this an active family that likes nature and they're out and about? Are they ones that are artistic and they like to do crafts at home together? So maybe you can create family projects throughout the year that reinforce what things they're really strong at as a family, and maybe introducing new things that they can do together as a family. Talking about what their main language is that they speak at home, what are some of their family traditions, and it doesn't have to be just cultural traditions. It could be traditions that they've come up with as a family every year. And so learning about that and bringing that into your teaching as well. And do you have items that reflect on your family's culture that you'd be willing to share with your class? So pictures, stories, instruments, it could be weaving or pottery. So as you're learning about different topics through the year, maybe you could come back to this and say, this family has some things that they could probably bring in to talk about this unit or to reiterate the things that we are talking about. So again, bringing those family values in here. Any special skills or talents that you can tap into that parents can come back and share, and then anything else that they would like to address. So again, taking that survey to the next level with their cultural values.
So if I can interject really quick, that's a pretty long survey, right? And so you could give it at one time, or you don't have to do it all at one time. You could really break it up. You can either send it home written, or you can use it as a guide for yourself as you're kind of interviewing the family. So you can use it in a variety of ways. If you just wanted to take a piece of it and just use a portion at a time, you can do that. So know that it's not, set in stone. You can kind of alter and decide how you want to use that.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's a great point. And then we have a magnet that's called Meaningful Conversations at Home. And again, we have it in multiple different languages, but it gives your parents the ideas of what you can do. So you could actually print this out, put it on a magnet, and then your parents could have this on the refrigerator. So it tells them what are some ways that they can communicate with their children? What are questions that they can ask? What are some things that they can do to inspire their children to think a little deeper or a little bit more? So tying in those relationships, not only our relationships with these families, but the relationship of our parents and families with our students as well. So you'll have these, and I think we have them translated in Chinese and Vietnamese, there's Spanish, we're working on an Arabic translation. So depending on those languages, you'll have that ability to have access to those multiple languages as well. There's also a bookmark, and that bookmark we created also in multiple languages, but it's something that they can easily have. Any book that they're reading, they can have this laminated, and it'll remind them what kind of questions they can ask their children as they are reading books together. So using picture books, talking about what they see in those picture books, helping those child make predictions, explaining what the book reminds you of and why, and making those connections. So things that you do naturally as a teacher, we want to start teaching those skills to our families so they can delve in deeper when we're talking about literacy skills. And again, really bringing things back to student learning. So the reason why we do all of this is to build relationships and to build communication so that our students can be better learners, and it all ties together that way. You'll also see that we've created a pocket guide. So this is something easy that parents can take with them, and it says learning is everywhere. And so there's a family interview. How well do you know your child? Things that you can ask them and see if you get the right answer about them. There's the alphabet game and rhyming activities, playing 20 questions, and a shape hunt. And so again, we have it in English, and then we're working on the Spanish translation. And so they can easily access this. So wherever they go, just in their wallet or their purse, they can have this and play games with their kids and learning activities and incorporate it in their everyday lives. We have Engaging Families on Social Media, which is that beginner's guide on how to engage people on social media. And along with that, I just want to open up another one that is actually not on our Padlet. We're going to have to either email it out. It was too large of a file to put into our Padlet, but what we've created here is to go hand in hand with that social media guide. We created a guide that you can create social media posts. And so we've given you social media posts for every week of the year. And how we split it up was week one's topic. We chose to do healthy habits, things to remind parents to do at home. Week two is school tips. So ways to keep parents involved, helpful phone numbers for schools that they should be aware of, where to go if they need resources within your building. Week three is resources. So are there good online sites for reading books in various languages? Are there math sites that they can go to help gain math skills together? And then week four, we focused on some type of a seasonal craft or a family adventure that we could give them ideas to spark together. And we also encouraged parents to share their pictures, let us know what they've done as they do these different activities. And so here you'll see the different topics for September. We go on to the next page, and it has pictures to go along with each one. So again, we know putting pictures on there is going to help make things easier. I catch their attention better. And so again, weekly activities, weekly posts with pictures to coordinate with that. So we've got that. And again, we'll share that out with a link through email when we follow up with you. And then again, you'll also be able to, hopefully we'll be able to get this on the Padlet, so it'll be with our other resources as well. Another thing we created was a family fun jar. And this family fun jar is basically a way where we, again, incorporate lots of different activities that parents can do with their families. And so what they can do is have a little jar. They cut out these different activities, they put it in the jar, and whenever they have free time, kids are bored, parents are free, you pick something out of there, you read it, and that's what we're going to do as a family today. And we could even tell parents, you don't have to put all of these in the jar. Pick the ones that you think that you could reasonably do within your family, so that when you pick one out, you can't say, oh, well, no, we can't do that one today. Ones that you know, whatever you pick, you'll actually be able to do. And we've also kept some blanks so that hopefully kids and parents will get excited and start to create their own that they could put in there as well. So that's our family fun jar in there. So again, lots of resources as far as things that you could use with surveys and activities to build those relationships with parents and their children and families and the students or children that are within their household. So again, not just parents, but other family members as well. Any questions about the tools that we have there? Questions or comments?
It's really exciting. And as you can see, a lot of the tools, most of the tools, they are really in service of student learning. You know, that's kind of at the heart of it. And how do we build those relationships with families and to get them as a partner in our students' learning? So very exciting. We'll be adding more to that. Not to overwhelm you, but just to know that you have them there. So when you have time, and you might be revisiting this in the fall, you know, just look and see what interests you. I know a lot of you signed up to engage in a tool review. And so that's kind of separate from the webinars. So some of you who had signed up to do that, you'll be sent kind of a little set of tools to review, to look at, to give feedback, to maybe test out. And that's kind of separate, and you'll get paid separately for that. So those of you who signed up for that, you'll be getting some more communication on that soon. All right, so we are nearing the end of our time together today. The last thing I want to engage us in today is this article from Quality Counts, and I went ahead and I put the link in the Padlet chat. Sorry, not the Padlet, the Zoom chat, if you can access that. Thank you, Laura. Yes, the bookmarks are very exciting. And we have refrigerator magnets, we have all kinds of stuff. So we're going to be adding more on there. I know one of them just has the Spanish, so we'll make sure to put the English. There's so many languages, and so we'll have to figure out where we're going to put all of it and make sure you guys have access to it. But if you have specific needs, like you say, I want that magnet, and you have it in Vietnamese or whatever it is, go ahead and you can send us that request and we can get that to you. The link for the Quality Counts article is in the Zoom chat. I'd like you to go ahead and have that kind of up on your screen. What we're going to do now, Leslie's going to help me break you guys up into some breakout rooms. We're going to have one group stay with us here in the main room, if you don't mind. Last time I know we sent you out into different rooms and we didn't capture anything for the recording for that portion because we didn't have anyone in the main room. But we're going to break you up into different groups. Group A will probably be breakout room 1. And so if you notice on the article, there's some different sections here. Everybody is going to read that. Let me just open the article here. Everyone is going to read that first section there. This is strategies for building relationships with families. And you'll notice that it's kind of divided into 3 sections: using a strength-based approach, listen actively, and take informed action. And so I'd like everyone to pay attention to which group you're in. The first group is going to read that using strength-based approach section. The second group is going to read the listen actively section. And then the last group will read the take informed action section. And so you're just responsible for just reading a small portion of the article, and then we'll have a whole share out so that you can kind of listen to others about the other sections as well. You'll have the whole article, obviously, if you want to read the whole thing. But as you read through your section, I want you as a group to kind of capture some key ideas that you're going to share out with the whole group. So what are kind of some of the key components from your section? Really, I thought, and I know our team thought, was a useful and manageable reading to do around building effective relationships. So any questions about your task here? We're going to spend probably about, I would say, 7 to 10 minutes to do this. It shouldn't take you too long to read. And then we'll do probably about 5 minutes of sharing out. And then we want to give you some time at the very end to complete our survey and to talk about applying this knowledge and kind of where we're going to go with the next webinar as well. So any questions? Does everybody have access to the article? Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Leslie, how are we doing on breakout rooms? We're good? Okay, so one group is going to stay here, and I'm assuming it's training room 1.
All right, Suzanne, I'll leave you here too, and then I'll jump into room 1.
Just want to make sure we're all reading the right section. So I'm going to say that we are, let's read the 3rd section because it looks like she's got training room 1. Let me just double check. And then the main room, we will do the last section.
So confirming we're reading the last section.
Yeah, I'm just going to get confirmation from everybody else to make sure everyone, because training room 1, I said is going to do the 1st section. Training room 2 is going to do the 2nd section. And then we're in the main room. So I'm going to make sure that we do the last one. Does that sound good to you, ladies?
Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a minute and read that, and then we'll chat about it.
Sorry, could you confirm one more time the section we're supposed to read? What is the heading?
Sure, the heading is Take Informed Action. And to the right of it is a picture of, I think it's a dad and his child. An African-American dad with a cool looking hat with green and yellow. Do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Suzanne, when did you want me to bring everyone back in? Sorry, what?
Sorry, I was just texting you. I'm going to say in 7 minutes, but could you do me a favor? Soha made sure that room 2 is reading the 2nd section. Listen actively. Is training room 1 reading using strength-based approach?
No, but we can.
Because we're doing the last one. This group is doing Take Informed Action. So if you could make sure. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm glad she asked. So let me know when you guys are finished reading that section. We can chat about it.
I'm finished.
Okay.
I'm also finished.
Okay. Teresa, how are you doing on it?
I'm finished.
Okay. So let's talk about it. So taking informed action. So in some ways it's kind of linear, right? And so we've got the first group who's going to be using a strength-based approach, who's reading that section, who's going to share with us what that is. But it's, when you think about the strength-based approach, we're thinking about all the perspectives, right? So your own perspective, the family's perspective, the child's perspective, and then how does that influence your interactions with families? And then we kind of move towards down the trajectory to listen actively. So, you know, active listening. Are we really involved, being present with the family? Are we paraphrasing what they're saying? And then we move to our section, which is taking informed action. So based on that information that we've gathered, right, and that we've considered all these perspectives, then what have we learned about the family? And so what kinds of informed action, I guess, you know, kind of as we read through this, can you think of any examples? Maybe some relationship-based practices that you have done just to kind of support you in partnering with families?
This doesn't really answer your question, but I really like that very first sentence. When you engage with families, you form a relationship on behalf of the child.
Yeah.
So I just feel like we, as educators, need to educate the whole child. And when we don't take into consideration a lot of the things we've discussed today, the cultural context, the experience with schooling, the cultural norms, and what that child goes home to at the end of the day, we're fighting a losing battle. So
Right.
you really have to, in order to educate the whole child, you really have to know and honor that familial connection, and you can do so by forming that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of related it a little bit to marriage. You know, they say, oh, you're, you know, well, you do marry the family too.
Right,
You kind of have to know about all of them too, and their little nuances and their quirks.
Right. And we have them for 6 hours a day. So we have a portion of the impact on their education, but another professional development type thing that another teacher has done as far as how parents can support reading, the teacher started it by saying, you are your child's first teacher and you are your child's most important teacher. So I think that goes a long way too, to think about it through that lens.
Yeah. Great point.
I love your analogy about when you marry someone, you marry the family. That's so, I will always remember that now. That's a great way to sum it up. I think a good thing to do that I've done is, of course, assuming they have the technology, well, we taught them how to do it, is, you know, making a slide about your family. So at the beginning of the year, you know, like, who are you? You could do it when it's the child's birthday, pull out the slide and celebrate them the whole week. But you know, would be based on them and their family, because that's how they connect. That's in the world. That's how they view themselves, as part of this big unit. And that's why school can be so scary for them, because they're away from their family unit. But if they create a slide, you know, there's so many prefab things that you can just send out and just tell us about you and your family, and ask and really focus on those questions. You know, what holidays do you celebrate? And as a teacher, of course, being very cognizant of everybody's holiday that is in your class, and you know, creating libraries and reading books those holidays and from their culture. And but just in the beginning of the year, I think that's a really good way, just having them make a slide, a getting to know you slide, and you could, set it up and just really, really have it revolve around them and their family. How many people are in your family?
Yeah.
What are your traditions?
Yeah, those all about me posters. I remember my son doing those in kindergarten. Those were fun.
But there's even better slides now that, and you can even display them on a Google Classroom so everybody can look at them once.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of cool.
Shannon, sorry, we ran out of time. Did you want to share something real quick?
No, I think they pretty much covered they had some of the same ideas that I was going to share as well.
Okay, great. Well, welcome back, everybody. Do we have everyone back? Sorry if there was any confusion about what to read. So training room 1 hopefully read the first section. Training room 2 read the second one, listen actively. And then we were in the main room and we read the last piece. So let's start with the first section. If you haven't, you all can tell from that first page of this resource here that, they're suggesting some strategies for building relationship with families. And there are 3 strategies that they are suggesting. And that first one is using a strength-based approach. So let's hear from group 1 about what you talked about, what was in the reading. Who wants to share?
I can share. So we were talking about, trying to have that positive attitude when approaching families, and how it's also important to have that self-reflection piece too, that, we have to reevaluate what approach are we taking, what are my biases already, and then one of my teammates also brought up the point that we also need to take in the kids' perspective into account, which sometimes gets forgotten, where, we're thinking about us and the other adults and how do we communicate, and then the kid kind of gets stuck in the middle, kind of left out and going back and forth between this is what I do at school, this is what I do at home, and kind of that flip-flop switch. So that's kind of the things that we were talking about, but always trying to keep that positive perspective in mind, even when it's hard and you've said the same thing 20 times to the same family over and over again, and they still don't understand. And it's trying to just be like, okay, but we're all here for the student and trying to make sure that they're successful. So it's finding a different means to get there.
Thank you, Laura. And you bring up a great point. Something that we've talked about extensively too is the first piece that you talked about, that self-reflection piece, which so many of us have engaged in so many learning experiences around, but it's something that is so important that we all have biases, and it's really identifying what are those biases and bringing them to the forefront and doing the work, to acknowledge what those are and why you have those and what we can do to kind of overcome those. And so that's a hard, that's hard work, really hard work to kind of really dig deep, but it's so important. We do have to kind of really unpack that and see how that affects our work, especially with relationships. So I'm glad you brought that up. Anything else from group 1? All right, let's move to our second group, listen actively. I thought that this section was really interesting and offered some great suggestions. Let's hear from group 2.
So we talked about that basically in the article, it had 3 tools for being an active listener. The first one was being present. So just that idea that you give yourself enough time for the meeting, you don't have any distractions around you, other things like your phone are put away so you can really fully engage and listen to them. The second part was paraphrasing. So making sure a lot of times there's that miscommunication piece that you don't understand exactly what someone is saying or understand in the way that they're saying it. So making sure that you paraphrase back to them what they were saying so you can make sure that you understood what the family was trying to get across to you and that they understand what you're kind of saying to them. And then the last part was having some kind of engaging questions. And we talked about how a lot of times it's us talking a lot and giving strategies, but making sure to provide the time for families to share and making sure that if they're not sure, because sometimes they aren't sure of what how to answer the question, giving them options. Like, would it be this or this, just to start the conversation, to give them some ideas, and then continue on from there with more open-ended questions to get more information.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And then our last group, who wants to share about taking informed action? What does that mean? So that's our last group here. Anybody want to share? Shannon or Teresa or Robin?
Hang on one second.
Teresa, are you going to share?
I was having an internet, my computer.
Oh, sorry.
So I was trying to get back to the article. Sorry.
That's okay. Here, I can share it actually.
Okay, I've got it. Fine.
Okay.
So,
okay.
All right. So I liked in the beginning when it said building relationships with families can either be easier or it can be challenging. And isn't that so true? Like, you know, depending on the circumstances, it could just kind of either flow or not flow, depending on what the challenges are, right? So the article talks about focusing on the family-child relationship, letting the families know that, you know, that your relationship with their child is really important. We talked a little bit about, you know, having them make a slide in the beginning, kind of like all about me, but sharing all about their family and all about their culture and their beliefs. And just kind of letting him know that, you know, you're there to support their child and that your relationship is based on educating and helping their child. And that's your connection. Observing and describing the child's behavior, to open communication with the family. Again, it's all child-centered. It's all, your relationship is focused on the child and their relationship with the family, but it's child-centered. Anybody else want to add? And also help the parents do a lot of parent ed to build their confidence, to help their child in school as much as you can, and value their passion. Again, I'm not tooting my own horn, but being on digital, doing virtual, I was able to find so many libraries on different resources that teachers had made that just went with so many different cultural celebrations or holidays or cultures, and we're able to just read books and just share so many different cultures and so many different ideas and things that kids had never heard before. So again, that's taking like a passion in their life and in their culture, and that creates a lot of connection right there.
Thank you, Teresa. And so we encourage you to kind of take a look at that article. You know, if you want to kind of learn a little bit more about each of those strategies, I'll make sure that I put that on the Padlet as well. I don't think it's on there right now, but I'll make sure that we have that on there. But as we wrap up here, I know we've got just about a minute left. We want you to think about, and you don't have to answer this right now, but thinking about what you can do to improve relationships with bilingual families and how does this connect directly to student learning. And so we're going to invite you to think about that. We're not asking you to like, okay, you know, report back, you know, use the survey and report back. We know that you may not be ready for that right now. You've got so much going on, but even if there's like a couple questions from that culture and value survey that you wanted to ask one of your families, you know, go ahead and try it out. We'd love that. We'd love to hear any feedback that you have around that. Or even if you have ideas for the fall, what you're hoping to do a little differently in the fall that you've done traditionally. So we'd love to hear any feedback from you around that. So that's kind of our application for today, is taking what you've learned today, looking at all the tools that we've offered and thinking about how might you do things differently in the near future. And so we'll have an opportunity for you to share that before our next session on the Padlet. So look for that. I'll send that in the follow-up email. Yes, thank you, Leslie. If you have ideas for additional tools that you want us to develop, please let us know. Just, you know, say, hey, I'm really looking for this, and we'll work on developing that. So before we end today, I am just sending you the link to the feedback form. if you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to fill that out. It shouldn't take you long. Again, we want to thank you for your time and attention today. If you missed webinar 1, we can send you the recording of it and you can watch it and you can engage in some of the reflection. As long as you answer the questions that we had on the Padlet, you'll still get credit for the getting the $50 bonus for attending all 3 webinars. You won't get paid for attending the actual webinar, but you'll get paid for reviewing the recording. And so you'll get the bonus basically. Same with today. If you know anyone, if you have colleagues or friends that were not able to join today's session, they can watch the recording. They'll still be eligible to get that $50 bonus. And the same goes for webinar number 3. So we are excited to see you again on May the 19th, I believe, is our webinar around advocacy. And so we'll talk about our 3rd component of our framework, which is advocacy. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Does anyone have questions or thoughts or requests for tools? Do you have any ideas?
I have one idea for a tool that would be helpful, and I don't know how reasonable this is, but for letter sounds, I have one list that's in Spanish. So like it takes a Spanish word for the letter sound and it gives them the Spanish word. So like A says something like this. But for other languages, that's really helpful when I can give it to the parents at the start of the year and they're like, oh, that's what it says in English. I didn't know.
Gotcha. Okay. That might be hard for some languages with some letters. I'm already thinking of some, but I think that that's something we can do. And I'm actually thinking if it already exists somewhere, I'll have to look. But if not, we'll get that for you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Leslie, anything else?
No, not from me. Thanks, everyone.
Soha, you good?
Oh, we can't hear you, Soha.
Sorry, I said thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Okay, need to stop the recording.